Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PC Gamer Show for July 3rd, 2019. We're brining again, though, aren't we? I'm just going to... No one cares. Do they care? I think people care.
I like to be brined and dined.
My stupid year naming scheme to describe...
No, we need to be able to track the dissolving of your mind by how you describe the year.
Yeah, it is sort of like a pale reflection of my mental health. The intros of these shows, I think. But yeah, it's
That's so bleak.
I'm fine.
Oh
I'm
God.
fine. I'm tired. I'm always tired. I think that's just like a thing
Yeah.
being an adult, air quote adult. It's
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I have never not
yeah.
frequently on the cusp of falling asleep.
I feel great.
Shut up,
What's your
Wes.
secret, Wes? It's because you eat homeopathic meals. Is homeopathic the right
I
word?
literally shoved a giant slice of pizza in my face like 20 minutes ago before the
That's
show.
homeopathic, man. I don't know what homeopathic means. I keep saying this word.
I like
Paleo.
paleo.
On
That's
my
what you're
better
thinking
days.
of.
On
Yeah.
my better days.
We have things to talk about. There's not a lot of new stuff, right? Not a lot of new games. I think we're really in that lull, that summer lull when we all try. We say we're gonna tear our backlog up, but we just don't. We just don't. But still, things are happening. We're gonna talk about some Eve drama because there's been some really interesting stuff going on, and Steve's been doing a great job breaking down that stuff like pretty much as it happens.
Turns out more interesting for us on the outside, perhaps, than for the player.
We'll get
As
to
is the
that.
case.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about the best and worst stuff of the year so far. We're into number 7 month-wise, and that is 1 after 6. Which, if you take 6, multiply it times 2, you get 12. So there are 12 months in a year. All this to say, the year's over halfway done. So we're going to talk about everything we have liked so far, some of the biggest disappointments, and maybe look ahead to the rest of the year. We're going to talk about auto chess, finally. Well, I talked auto chess last week, but it was me trying to learn Underlords live on the show by myself.
You
And
didn't have a
Time
great
to
time.
do
did
it.
you?
just getting mad the whole time. But we're going to talk about Teamfight Tactics primarily, maybe auto chess as a whole, because it's an interesting phenomenon, kind of sprouted up out of nowhere. Not out of nowhere, but it felt very sudden. And you two have you both been playing Teamfight Tactics?
Yeah, that's the only
Yep.
one I've really been touching.
Gotcha.
Same here. I dabbled in Underlords a little bit and then switched over to Teamfight Tactics.
Right. I've only touched Underlords, so we'll have a lot of interesting comparisons to make, I'm sure. Yeah, and then we'll close out with questions and carry on with our lives until next week. Before we do any of that, let's talk about our highlights of the week. And our highlights of the week are anything that happened in PC gaming that we found interesting, whether it's something we played, read, saw, heard, smelled, even. And why don't we start
Sensed.
with anything we sensed in PC gaming? Premonitions tingling down my spine. Who wants to go first? Wes?
Hold on, James. Do you ever meditate?
I
Have you ever
do.
meditated?
I have.
Did a PC game ever come to you in a meditative state?
Vision.
Have you ever been meditating and then just seen Fortnite in your mind's eye?
Honestly, I have Fortnite dreams now, you guys.
Do you really?
I've had a couple.
I can't remember the last time I dreamed about a video game.
It's
I used to have a lot of League of Legends dreams when I played that game the
I've
whole
had League
time.
of Legends streams.
what
that
kind
would
of
be
League of
the last
Legends dreams?
I just would. It
Naughty
would just be
ones.
me playing the game in my head.
Okay.
My
Cool
mind
brain.
would just concoct a match, and then I would be in it, and I would just have to,
Yeah.
I'm playing bottom lane, and I gotta move my character, and like I would just have to like tell myself like, you're not playing the game. Stop being
This isn't
invested.
real.
Stop
Yeah.
being invested in this match that you have completely 100% imagined. and go to fuck to sleep.
I've had stress streams about League of Legends, just where I'm doing really badly and I'm letting the whole team down, and they're like beacon me in chat. So I sympathize.
Yeah. So my highlights for the week are not League of Legends nightmares. I don't have those anymore, thankfully. I'm gonna say a medieval, which I've been playing a good bit since I guess last week I started playing it, and it has okay, so it's like a throwback FPS, very much in the vein of Heretic or Hexen. So it's more like those games than like Doom in terms of the aesthetics, are more like less like Quake,
Yeah.
sci-fi, more like this kind of fantasy,
Arcane, freaky.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the weapons are all real weird in that vein. Like you have a sword that shoots out like green kind of slices of energy, a trident that electrocutes shit. That one's real cool. You have like a staff that shoots out blue orbs, big old battle axe, and my favorite, probably everyone's favorite, is a staff that shoots out shrunken down planets.
Yeah, that was great.
So it's like a grenade launcher, but they're just globes that are shrunken down into this like kind of withered staff, and then you fire it, and they just go boom, and just shoot out, and then explode, and it's like your second most powerful weapon in the game, and you can go into like superpower mode and shoot those off, and then they like send out like a explosive ring that will hit anything in its path. And
Okay, but like, are they planets, or are they like do they just look like planets, or is it like you are literally plucking celestial bodies out of space and then firing them from your staff?
So there isn't an animation of you plucking them out, but that is what they are. They
It's
are
implied.
shrunken
Okay.
planets, because there's actually a bit of text that will appear on the screen, and I think a Steam achievement attached to this where it's like random what the orb looks like, what the planet is, and
Right.
like every 13th one you fire or whatever will be the planet Earth, and a bit of text will appear on the screen that just says like, you just destroyed the Earth ...
It's
That
so silly.
sounds badass.
And the first time you do that, you get an achievement for it. So so it's pretty cool. It's like the fact that they're planets doesn't actually matter to the weapon. It's just a very fun bit of over the top color for that game, which that whole game is over the top flavor. But I really appreciate one aspect of the design, which is each kind of world you go to, of which there are I think 7, is dramatically different from the other ones aesthetically, and they change up the enemies that you're fighting. And it's a throwback shooter. The enemies are not super complicated, right? There's like the melee dude that comes straight at you, and the one that attacks you from range, and like the big really strong one. But they have enough variety, both visually and slightly changing their attacks between the different settings, that it keeps it really fresh, and in a way that I think wouldn't it would not hold up to be fighting against the same enemies in this game for 10 or 12 hours. Like, it'd be fine, they're just fodder for you there to shoot, but they're not interesting. Like, you see their 1 or 2 things they can do immediately, and then you're used to them. So it's really nice that like you play through one of these worlds in about maybe an hour and a half or so, an hour, depending on how fast you're going, and then you're on to the next one, and they have just totally different aesthetics and some different moves and stuff. So it's pretty rad. I'm in like outer space now, but sort of like not maybe not outer space, more like some kind of galactic spirit realm. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah,
it's a good time.
It gets out there in that like celestial fantasy.
It starts out there and it gets more out there.
Yeah, and I don't think it's the same, not the exact same team making it that made Dusk, but there's some crossover there. And
same
both
publisher, I think.
Yeah, New Bloods Interactive, I think, and same guy making music for both. Andrew Hulshult, I don't know, who did like the Brutal Doom soundtrack, I believe, or something like that.
Okay.
Pretty good shit. But Dusk, I've played some of the early access levels of Medieval, like about a year ago. I don't know if they've changed significantly, but both Dusk and Medieval I love. Not necessarily like the action is fine, the shooting is fine. It's just kind of like horde-based shooting. It's big arenas full of enemies, and They're not very smart. You just have to survive the onslaught and pick them off quickly. It's the level design that I really, really like in these. It feels like they kind of toss out the playbook, or at least like what the last like 20 years of level design, and
sure.
and just like pick up where Quake left off and just do these big, wild. Sometimes they feel a little aimless, and that can be a problem because you have to search for like a button that's hidden under a staircase, and that can be annoying. But it is also extremely refreshing to not feel like you know exactly what to do at any given moment. And so many of them have like play with geometry in really and color in really fascinating ways. It's like it's stunning to look at. It's one of the prettiest. It has some extremely pretty scenes. So
yeah. Medieval definitely has some of its levels have this feeling of somebody was like, yo, it would be metal as fuck if we did X. And like you know, I would say there's some really good level design in there just from the experience of exploring it and like how they're kind of constructed and tied together. And then there's other ones that I wouldn't praise for that aspect of design, but I would praise just for being a weird, crazy idea. Like, we're going to have these monolithic towers set over this kind of wasteland, and you're going to be just like jumping between them. And then you can kind of look back and just see like this vast, you know, these vast distances, and like how gigantic the scale of this thing feels is like overwhelming. And it's just like really cool, even if the actual level isn't actually that fun to explore. But you're just like, this place, someone had the idea to create this thing, and I don't know how this came out of somebody's brain, but well done.
Yeah, it's really good shit. Medieval and Dusk, highly recommend both those. So cool. Anything else, Wes?
That's my highlight of the week.
Right on. Steven, what's up? Bring the shadow. Bring it here.
Steven, you're muted, I think. You're muted. I can't hear you.
I was talking so quietly that it wasn't being picked up on the microphone. Hi.
Hello again.
Hi. How you guys doing? You guys doing good?
Yeah.
Is the show started? Are we doing?
We're live. We're live.
Oh, okay, cool. What's up? Shadowbringers. That's my highlight of the week. The Final Fantasy 14 expansion is finally out. God damn, is it good? I'm loving it.
Can you translate for us why? Because I think talking about Final Fantasy. Well, I mean, first of all, that fucking trailer, it is absolute nonsense. The story is built on like almost a decade or something at this point of convoluted nonsense. But if you play it,
yeah, we're in Slack this makes no sense. And Steven's like, oh my god,
flipping out. Zoria picked up the sword of Ultron and blah, 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 and her shadow. I don't know.
Is bringing it. So I finally today was thinking about it because I'm obviously going to write about this for the website at some point. I haven't gotten far enough into the story yet where I feel like I can sort of confidently make a judgment on this story, but it's been really good so far. But where it's headed, certainly, and I think the payoff is there. And the way that I would describe it is it's Endgame. It's Marvel. It's Avengers Endgame for the cinematic universe. That's the way you can think about it. So you think of like 6 years plus, in the case of Marvel, of storytelling and world building and stuff like that. And Shadowbringers is this expansion where it feels like it's all coming together in this very sort of high stakes adventure. So there's like, if you're a Final Fantasy 14 nut like I am, things are coming together in these plot threads, and seeds that were sown 4 years ago are starting to like bear fruit and come to fruition in really exciting ways. And it's a really good expansion so far. It's been so much fun to play. The new zones are really cool and look really pretty. I think like the cinematics have taken sort of like another leap up. The voiceover is better. It just feels like this marked improvement. And in addition, like the main story just feels so strong. Yeah, I wish I could talk about like even specifics, but like even trying to just summarize what's happening would require like explaining the last two expansions in the silliest way.
In this expansion, isn't there either a raid or a quest or something designed by Yoko Taro.
Yeah. So it's not out yet. I think that'll be coming in sort of their 0.1 update, is usually when that type of raid comes out. But I'm really excited to see what they do there. So for context, in the last expansion, Stormblood, Wes, you're gonna have to help me with his name. The creator of sort of the Evolution Final Fantasy, like Final Fantasy Tactics 12.
Matsuno.
Yeah, Matsuno. He helped that team develop basically a raid that was set during Final Fantasy. In that Evolution setting of Final Fantasy. So it was a raid that sort of crossed over to Final Fantasy Tactics and then Final Fantasy 12. There was a character in it named Ramza, who wasn't the actual Ramza from Tactics. But anyway, they started doing these fun crossovers with some of their raids. And so the next one that's coming up is going to be a Nier Automata crossover. And I don't know how they're going to do it. At this point, like Final Fantasy 14 has become the drain cap in the bottom of the sink that just collects all the garbage of anime. But then, unlike the food garbage in your sink's drain cap, it's really good.
I mean, didn't they have in your base game of?
I don't want people thinking that I eat the food that collects in my drain cap. It was a bad analogy.
Wait, you don't eat that? You let that go to waste?
It's Wes's secret.
Yeah, that's why you feel so good.
It's like being Swamp Thing. Just collect your sustenance from whatever garbage is around you. No, I was gonna say in A Realm Reborn, didn't they bring in like the Magitech armor from Final Fantasy VI?
Yeah.
And the bad guys are just fucking judges from Final Fantasy 12, except aliens.
Yeah.
Something.
So like the series very true, like very much like pulls in all of the Final Fantasy, and it leans more towards the traditional Final Fantasy. So like 6 is a big influence there. There's not so much of like Final Fantasy 10, let's say, but like 9 is a big influence as well. And then they've done crossover events, like Lightning has shown up in a few quests, and so is like Noctis. You can now drive the that car, whatever it's called, from Final Fantasy 15 around, which I actually hate. It completely ruins like this beautiful, mysterious wonderland that you're exploring.
It doesn't really seem like an aesthetic fit.
No, and like I get why they did it, and it's cool and whatever, but maybe they should have made it harder to get. It is pretty hard to get, actually. You have to be very rich to buy the car. But I see people all over have it. Like a lot of people still have it, and it kind of ruins the wonder and enjoyment. Like I'm in this fairy wonderland right now, and it's very pristine and gorgeous, and then to just see like 4 dudes cruising by in a car.
They should have to pay monthly auto insurance to
just to keep it.
Like a very high fee to keep it.
That's a minor complaint. So yeah, like it's this expansion more than any previous expansion is really exciting because it feels like they're leveraging this enormous world and all these characters that they've built and all these sort of plot threads that they've developed. They're finally sort of tying them all together, and they're doing a really good job of it so far. Things are coming together in ways that's almost like a bit dizzying, where you're just like, oh my God, like I can't believe sort of the stakes that are, or what's at stake here and what they're going for. In addition, like I'm reading comments and staying up to date on sort of the discourse, and I'm continually seeing people being like, oh my God, like there were parts of the story that actually made me cry. So apparently like it gets very heavy and emotional. It's definitely like the darkest expansion they've ever done. Like I was even shocked by some of the things that happen. There's a woman who gets transformed into this monster called a Sin Eater, and it was horrific. Like I actually was audibly was like, oh my God, like it was really gross. Her like jaw hinged and she was like, ah! And then her like white goo started leaking from her, like all of her eyes and her nose. And
yes,
it was very like body horror, and I was like, oh my God, this is awful. And then eventually you have to
you found some down games want to play in MMO.
Yeah, I'm in.
Body horror.
It's cool. I think I'm excited to get to the end of this expansion because I wrote an article, what was that, last week, or earlier this week, last week, about how Final Fantasy 14 is my favorite MMO, but I have such a hard time recommending it because it requires there's no way to sort of skip to the end. Like World of Warcraft, you can just jump in with the current expansion and start having a good time. Final Fantasy, so much of the game is built on going through this journey, this 6-year journey through each of the expansions, paying attention to all the story and playing it like you would have played it when it was sort of happening live instead of, rushing through it to catch up. And so that makes it a really hard thing to recommend because it's just such an enormous ask to be like, hey, in order to enjoy, Shadowbringers, you need to play 200 hours of everything that came before. And the first maybe 60 hours isn't that great. It's only at hour 70 that it starts to pick up. I'm hoping that Shadowbringers is good enough that I can more wholeheartedly recommend being like, look, it's a crazy journey. If you have 300 hours on your plate to play a game, then do it. But like it's absolutely worth it in the end. Whereas now I've always been kind of like, am I the only one that like love? Or obviously a lot of people like it, but when you're recommending something and you're like, am I overselling this basically? Like I don't know. I would feel really bad if one of you guys spent 250 hours playing this game and then got to the end and you were like, meh.
I think Bo has been into it hardcore, though I could be wrong. I think he started playing it.
Yeah, he is.
I remain skeptical because people said that the Realm Reborn story was great and better than most of the Final Fantasy games, and I played a shitload of that, and it was not.
It's not. That's bullshit. Those people have bad opinions. Heavensward is where I put sort of the tied a bow on Heavensward, a couple years ago and finished it up, and I genuinely was like, wow, that was like better than any of the previous Final Fantasies up to 12. So I'm wondering if I can put more Final Fantasies below it on the hierarchy. Like I really just I want it to be good enough that I can confidently come out in public and tell people that it's better than Final Fantasy VII, because I think that game's been looking to be kicked off its pedestal for a long time.
I don't think many people consider it the best in the series, Steven.
7?
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people do.
A particular subset of fans.
Fake fans.
Fair enough. Anyway, so it's really good. If you're marginally interested, if you like MMOs, I think it's the best MMO to play right now. If you're a Final Fantasy 14 fan, you're already playing it. Like, what are you doing if you're playing Final Fantasy 14? But you're like, don't miss me with that Shadowbringer shit. So, anyway,
cool.
Steven, before I know this is a tangent. James still needs to do his highlight, but you mentioned recently you want to try Final Fantasy 11 at some point.
Oh, I've already played a lot of it.
Oh, have you? Maybe it was somebody else who was saying they wanted to try it out. I think it was.
I feel like. Okay.
Yeah, I must be thinking of somebody else, but I was thinking like that will make for an entertaining
comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we were talking about me wanting to go back to it because I do feel like I remember having a conversation about it with you recently. But Final Fantasy 11 is still great. I still think that game is. Yeah, they're like making a mobile version of it now, and I hope that they do an okay job of it because it would be cool to have that game be accessible to a new audience and then sort of be brought back from the dead.
And you could play it at the same time you play 14, just on your iPad.
Oh my god.
That's right.
Someone's gonna do that.
Just every screen is a different Final Fantasy game. That's my dream.
When are they gonna make the last one? Anyway,
everyone they make, they think, oh, we fucked
they
up.
They make it with that in mind. Okay, I don't think I've ever finished a Final Fantasy game. I've played a lot of them, but I've never finished one.
I have certainly not finished a lot of the later ones. Like I love 12 and I think it's great. I've never beaten it. 13 is and
the PC version for 12 has like a fast forward feature for excuse me. Combat and cutscenes or something like that. Not cutscenes.
For just moving around, even you can fast forward. Yeah, it makes it way more fun. 12 is like a really good game. I also love it because it's very MMO-esque.
Maybe I can get into that.
It's very good.
Cool. Just quickly, my highlight is an old game. It's old now. Hollow Knight. I've been playing Hollow Knight again.
What's that?
It's a.
Never heard of this.
The internet, depending on who you ask, will say it's a Metroidvania. Some will say, I don't like that word.
We don't use that word anymore.
Some people like me will say, who fucking cares?
You're gonna go to game jail for using that word, James.
Video game jail. It is, well, I do call it the best Metroid game because I think it is. And we've talked about it at length on many shows and on the website. But I've just been revisiting it to check out the DLC editions because I missed those the first time around, and they are bonkers. I will never finish some of them, like never. But I appreciate them for what they are. One, I'm forgetting, the Grim Troop, I think it's called, basically adds a nightmare circus from hell, bug hell, to it's pretty much bug hell to the hometown Dirtmouth, and you just roll in as the Hollow Knight, and they're like, "Hey, will you like raise this baby demon?" And you say nothing, but you agree because you're the Hollow Knight, and you can equip this this gem that are they called gems? Am I crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Something like that.
gives
They're
you a
not
tiny
gems, but-
companion that floats around with you, and it gives you this like kind of side quest that tasks you with moving around the map and finding these like ghosts. Basically, you have to kill these trickster spirits to feed the demon baby, because as part of this weird, it's kind of a side story, but it's more of like it gives it builds out like the more spiritual aspects or like supernatural aspects of the world. You need to raise this baby to fight the demon king, or what, I forget what he's called.
As you do.
And
James, this is so your jam.
it's good. I'll never beat it because the boss is like, it's like, it's way harder than the Radiance, the final boss, the true ending boss. So I'll never beat it.
Spoilers.
Sorry. I mean, like,
It's fine.
yeah, sorry about that.
You said a name. Oh no.
But it's way harder. It's I don't know if it's worth it. I don't know what you get at the end of it, but that's only one part of this end game experience, because in Gods and Monsters or something, I think one of the expansions, the final expansion basically adds this, it builds out the spiritual background of the world even more, and does so with these, what are they called, God Eaters, God something characters, and their whole thing is to attain godhood by tuning in with like powerful creatures, and that basically gives by doing that, you do that by basically fighting more difficult versions of all the bosses in the game. And I read at one point that to achieve godhood in this expansion, that there is a challenge to beat this expansion. You need to beat every boss in the game in a row, like no breaks, one shot.
Jesus.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I don't know if like what exactly that means, but I was just kind of watching some lore videos because I mostly wanted to know the story, and I knew that I don't really care for that kind of difficulty, that kind of challenge. Like, I don't need to do that or want to do that. Exploration is really what I love about Hollow Knight and that world. The combat's fun and fine, but yeah, it's bonkers. There's so much. If you really like the combat, if you like the story, there's a lot of good side content.
And honestly, I think I'm with you. Like that doesn't. I wouldn't go back to Hollow Knight to refight the same bosses all in a row, but I feel like that's pretty. It's better for that to be the DLC for that game, because the world is already one. It's so well designed, but it's already so big for that kind of game that I don't really want DLC for the original Hollow Knight that's like, here's 3 entirely new areas to explore. Like that map is great the way it is. They bulked it up a little bit. They're making a sequel. I will happily explore a new, fresh world designed in the same way, but I don't want them to keep like bolting on tons of new areas. Map, it just gets to be too big.
It's too big, and the joy of exploration in that game is from stumbling into that stuff in your own circuitous way, rather than just like, oh, there's a new area that appeared, like it kind of sucks some of the mystery and fun out of that. But anyway, Hollow Knight, fucking amazing game.
That game is incredible. As someone that's going through it for the first time, it's outrageous how good that game is.
It's the one. Sorry.
Have you been into the blanking on the name now, but the really creepy area?
Deep Nest.
I don't want to.
The
Yeah,
Deep
Deep
Nest.
Nest. Yeah.
Yeah, I've cleared that. I only have like I'm probably 80% of the way through it.
Gotcha.
The first time
Mine is the DLC.
there's like a few different ways you can arrive in the Deep Nest. But I
Yeah.
think like a lot of people, were going somewhere and then just fell through the floor and
Yeah.
ended up in it, and you're just like, what the
That's the best
What
way
the
to
fuck is
find the
this?
Deep
Yeah.
Nest, and then suddenly spiders are everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's real scary.
Yeah, yeah, I love that
That place
arcane
is
shit.
so creepy.
Yeah, Hollow Knight's amazing. It's the one, like, my partner, she loves watching me play it because she just loves the animation is so good, and all the character art. Anyway, I could talk about that shit forever, but I won't. The other highlight of the week, I think, was this quiz that our UK colleagues wrote. And I think I want to run through some of these so our listeners can play along at home or live here in Twitch, because it is this quiz broke my mind a little bit because I thought I knew craft beer somewhat, right? And I thought I knew Destiny exotics. I've played hundreds and hundreds of hours of Destiny, like nowhere near Tim's towering playtime, but I've played a lot. And I thought I would know, but this quiz is Destiny exotic or craft beer. And if you haven't played Destiny, you don't know, there are like rare weapons, and they are unique and named, and they have really stupid, like overwrought. I mean, they're good, but they're self-aware.
And so do craft beers.
And so do craft beer, yeah, like really convoluted or overreaching names for very simple things. It's guns and alcohol, So let's go through a couple of these together. I've taken this before, but I don't think I'll do any better than I did last time. And I know you guys maybe glanced at it briefly, but let's go through this. All right, I'm gonna start it.
Yeah.
All righty. So, Destiny exotic, craft beer, or both. Stark Baffler. Craft
beer.
Craft beer.
You got a craft beer? Okay, I'll put that down. It's a Destiny exotic. It's a Destiny exotic.
Shut up. Stark Baffler.
Stark Baffler. All right. Grandpa's Dark Side. Destiny exotic, craft beer, or both?
That's a craft beer for sure.
Both.
We got a both and a craft beer. All right. Let's see. It's craft beer. It's craft beer.
Yeah.
Midnight Anthracite. Midnight Anthracite?
Okay, this is either an exotic or both.
Both.
But which?
Can it be one, the other, or both?
Yeah, it can be exotic, beer, or both.
Oh, okay.
I was just saying, I don't think this one's just a beer, but it could be a both.
I think it's just an exotic.
Me too.
Okay. You're wrong. It's craft beer. It's a craft beer. Let's get this one. Ace of Spades. Exotic, beer, or both?
Oh, I know this is an exotic.
This is definitely both.
It's both.
Oh yeah, it's got to be both.
It's both.
Sorry.
It's both. Sweet Business.
Both.
Yeah.
Both. Correct. Hey, you got one. Good job,
Yes.
you two.
I
Risk.
got the last one too.
Risk Runner.
Oh, that's an exotic. Just an exotic.
I'm gonna say both.
Both and exotic. Let's see. It's both. Someone named to be a Risk Runner.
So is the lesson here everything is a craft beer?
That's a lot.
There's a lot of these. Polaris Lance. Polaris Lance.
Craft beer.
Exotic.
Exotic. Exotic. Nice, Wes.
Damn.
Lucky 14 Raspberry.
Exotic.
Exotic.
Both.
That's a craft beer.
Okay.
But Lucky Raspberry. What's that?
That's an exotic.
That's an exotic. Let's skip through a couple of these because there's some good ones here. I like this one. Simian Pandemic.
Craft beer.
Yeah, craft beer.
Got it. Tractor Cannon.
Both.
Exotic.
Dun, 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 dun. It's both. Someone named a beer Tractor Cannon, and I want to meet that person.
Someone named an exotic tractor cannon.
That's amazing.
Are there tractors in Destiny? I haven't played it.
There.
It could mean tractor, like tractor beam. like something that pulls in.
Yeah, it's a it actually does the opposite. It pushes. It's just like a big air. What do you call those air guns? Like a Dyson fan.
T-shirt cannons.
Tony's car. Let's just do a couple more here. Tony's car. I'm fucking mad about this one. Let's see. We got a both.
Yeah.
Tony's car.
Tony's car. It's a guy named Tony. His car.
Exotic.
It's a beer.
Fuck.
Wow, I like this one. Oh wait, here we go. Albino squid assassin.
Craft beer.
Yeah.
It's a craft beer. Let's do a couple more here. Rose and Bone.
I'm a child.
Both.
Both.
Oh,
No, craft beer.
It's an exotic.
Shut up. This quiz is making me
All
angry.
right, one more. Let's do one more. Curse of Foresight.
Exotic.
that sounds like a both.
That's an exotic, baby. Wait,
Ah.
I got to do this one. Even sharks need water.
Oh, that's both.
Sure. Why not? We'll go with both.
It's not. It's
That's a beer.
definitely just a beer. Yeah.
It's a beer. Oh, I like this one. These are all pretty good. Inglorious Quad.
Oh shit, that's both.
Fucking Bungie. That's a beer. All right, we'll leave the rest to the readers. I'll post that in chat and share it in the show notes. But go take the quiz for yourself. And
There's a disturbing amount of overlap there.
yeah, break your mind a little bit. But let's move on to our first topic of the week, and let's talk about Eve. Talk about the space
Eve.
game, man. Like what the heck's going on this week?
Oh man. So EVE Online players last Wednesday, so a week ago, had a very rude awakening because all across sort of the nullsec region of EVE Online, which is where all of the player empires are forged and hang out and go to war with one another, all of those player empires suddenly were besieged by this mysterious alien threat. And it's fascinating because it really it felt like what an alien threat would be, which is like you get this automated warning on like a computer somewhere that like something's under attack or something's not working properly, and you're like, what? You're like trying to investigate it, and the entire time you're just like, it certainly can't be. So I interviewed these players and I wrote this story. But basically what happened was, CCP Games, the developers, stealth launched this huge mass alien invasion, and so all of these player empires within sort of a short time frame all had a lot of their sort of home stations sieged by this massive alien threat that was very scary. And it was very chaotic. People just didn't know what was happening. There was no communication from CCP Games that this was going to happen. They didn't even acknowledge that it was happening as it was happening. So a lot of players were like, this is a bug.
Yeah, that was part of what made it so mysterious and disorienting, right? Is people were like, is this even meant to be happening? Is this a real thing, or is something just fucked up?
Yeah, a real quick question on that too. Is this like a normal, they haven't done this specifically before, but is the community maybe we'll get to that, mad about it because there's so much money and time invested in some of this stuff for them? The economy?
Yeah, we'll get to it. So it is it's not normal. CCP Games has almost never really interfered with their game. It's sort of one of their philosophical points almost, or philosophical sort of development philosophies. What am I saying? You get what I'm trying to
we got you.
Here.
We're all tired.
But EVE is this big sandbox, and CCP Games historically has done very little to try and tamper with the sandbox directly. Obviously, they make game changes and balances and all that kind of stuff, and that messes with the sandbox. But it's in terms of inserting their own narrative into the sandbox. They're usually pretty careful about that. Usually that kind of stuff happens and it's optional, it's opt-in. So, if you want to go participate in this cool quest line, you can go do that. But for them to basically grind the entire sort of political sphere of EVE Online to a halt, as these alliances were suddenly, waylaid by this massive alien force. One of the biggest alliances, the Imperium, was in the middle of one of the most destructive eviction campaigns people are saying in history, that's probably hyperbolic, but like a very destructive war that they were winning, and they had to sort of give up and call it quits early because they had to head home with their big fleet to defend their own space. And so they're very bitter about that. And so, yeah, it was just this very chaotic few days for EVE Online, as they didn't know what was happening. They didn't know it was a bug. The developers weren't acknowledging anything. They were refusing to talk to anyone. And then also then this fear of, well, how serious are these aliens? Nothing gets destroyed in EVE Online very easily. It takes, there's a lot of sort of balance systems in place to make sure that someone doesn't just show up when you're logged off and blow up your starbase. But as these aliens were sort of whittling away their defenses, people were, starting to kind of panic and being like, well, shit, like, are they just going to burn this entire game to the ground? So that was sort of the first phase of the invasion, was just this chaotic first response. Everyone was scrambling. It was, all hands on deck as these alliances were getting their people together and trying to orchestrate a defense and figuring out how to counter these aliens and how to fight back and, what was happening. And then it was really interesting because as they started to understand the threat better, as they started to, figure out strategies for fighting them and defending their space, they also started to see the limitations of what CCP Games was doing with this alien invasion. And it quickly became apparent that like these weren't like intelligent aliens. They weren't planning or strategizing or attacking weak spots. They were basically just spawning en masse randomly in different areas, hitting a system, and then just despawning or being blown up by the defense fleets. And then people started to get, at least the nullsec players, the people participating in these big empires, started getting really salty about this, because now basically their entire weekend is being spent defending your system from this alien threat that you kind of have to defend against, but they're not interesting to fight, and they're just overwhelming numbers. And so it was
basically
just,
they're like, if you're gonna wreck my shit, wreck my shit.
yeah, kind of like, yeah, like actually give us a threat. Or at least do something that's more interesting than just kind of spawning a fleet that we then just have to respond to in sort of an uninspired way. Like and so, and the fact that it was interrupting the political machinations of some of these big empires, I think was very frustrating for them. So, I, in the story I wrote for PC Gamer on Wednesday, and then in my follow-up story, I was speaking to a lot of the bigger alliance leaders, and they were all pretty upset by it. They were also upset on the philosophical level, because they were like, EVE Online is a game that's about player versus player war. It's a game about building up these empires and, having these narratives, and then going to war against other, your enemies who are other players. So to have all of that interrupted so that CCP Games could sort of insert this like PvE, player versus environment narrative into the game and make that mandatory for them to participate in, I think really kind of upset a lot of them. Of course, there's like the other side of EVE, which is there's the people who don't play the game that way. There's the people that play in sort of the safe region of EVE Online, where you're not really necessarily a part of like these huge player empires. You can, just do sort of whatever. That's where you can be like a space road trucker. It's called high sec, because there's high security and there's a police force that will kind of avenge you if you get wrongly killed and all that stuff. Those players, who the nullsec people refer to as Care Bears because they're too cowardly to play the real EVE, are gloating because they love seeing sort of this enemy who they're opposed to in sort of their play style getting screwed over all weekend, and so they're laughing and they think it's great.
Now the aliens weren't in high sec space, right?
No, and high sec does have already like these kinds of things where it's possible that like you can be traveling through high sec, and if you're not paying attention, you could warp into a system that's being invaded, and it's just like that's like a PvE event that's been around for a long time, and so it's possible that you could get yourself blown up. But to have them attacking structures, like to be blowing stuff up, and they did blow up a few things, was very scary.
It's kind of ironic that the people who more or less like signed up for this kind of interaction won't experience it because it's not in the part of the game that they hang out in.
Right. So the kind of, I think where it's heading is it's funny because I'm saying no one saw this coming, but the current Eve expansion is called Invasion, and but that came back out in May. And the invasion that it's talking about is this invasion of high sec. So they've had these sort of invasion mechanics before, but now they have sort of the 2.0 version, and it's this other alien space called the Triglavians who are invading high sec, and their mortal enemies are the Drifters who have just invaded low sec. And so where it seems to be going is maybe the Drifters and the Triglavians are going to go to war with one another, and then the players are going to be kind of caught between that. But anyway, that's all, just speculation. But yeah, I think people were upset that it probably wasn't sort of a big shakeup that people were hoping. Like, yes, it was really scary in the first few days, but it hasn't sort of changed the landscape of EVE Online in any significant way. And so it just sort of ended up being this minor inconvenience for these players that would prefer to just shoot real players versus shooting aliens. So it's been really interesting. It's still sort of this evolving story. Even today, so I published an update yesterday that was sort of covering the dissatisfaction. Oh yeah, and so the nullsec, sort of these leaders, are now banding together, which has never really happened before. But they've all decided to lay down their arms and their grudges against one another, and now they're like, well, fuck CCP for ruining our sandbox for us. We're gonna like try and hit them back. And so this isn't the first time. EVE Online has had lots of stuff like this where a player group has tried to ruin the game for everybody, which is something you can do in EVE Online. And so they're like trying to formulate these strategies where like, okay, well, maybe what we'll do is we'll blow up everyone in high sec as much as we can, and then if they're miserable, everyone's miserable, and then the game will start losing players, and then CCP will be like, well, we have to fix it, which I don't think will ever. I don't think CCP cares. I think they probably love that kind of shit because that's what EVE is made.
Well, it depends on how much it affects their bottom line, right?
Right. I don't know if it would have a tangible impact. That's the thing, is I think, it's not like
more players than ever before log on to make games suck, but actually just more people playing than usual.
Right. But it's fascinating. I love that there's those kind of things that I love that EVE creates these kind of narratives. Like we were joking in the Slack chat yesterday at work about like, what other game can you fight with the developers over? You know what I mean? Like, you can't really like send a message to Blizzard in World of Warcraft. So the fact that they're coming up with these ways of economically trying to sabotage EVE Online's sandbox is really fascinating. And then as I was saying before I remembered that, it's still evolving. So today the Drifters came back. They went away for like a day or two. Today they're back, and now they're actively hunting down players. They don't seem to be shooting their structures anymore, like their star bases. Now they're hunting down players, which is really interesting because EVE Online has a pretty bad problem with bots. People use scripts to automate the more boring aspects of the game, and so they just leave the bots running all day while they're doing other things, more productive things with their time. And these bots are just farming loads and loads. It's gold farming. It's automated gold farming in EVE Online, and that's kind of been a problem that the players have been trying to get CCP to do something, and CCP's been trying to do something, but it's a tough issue. I mean, like, every MMO has struggled with gold farming, and automated gold farming is just sort of the next level of that. I think CCP might have accidentally or intentionally figured out the way to solve it, which is they've just set these aliens to go and destroy anyone who's doing any kind of farming, whether they're at the computer actually playing or not. And because the way that these ships work, you can't really detect them like you can detect another player. And so these scripts are so smart, these botting scripts are so smart that they'll know when someone like warps into the same system as them to automatically go to like a safe zone, and they'll just do that automatically. And that's how they prevent losing their bots. That's how they stop their botting ships from getting blown up. But the aliens, the aliens aren't a player, so they don't have sort of the same game programming logic behind it. So the aliens can ambush bots. And so already there's, on the EVE subreddit, there's been lots of people showing sort of the kill reports of ships that they would suspect are botters. There's ways you can kind of like figure out if someone's botting. They'll usually like fly a certain ship, fit a certain way, and that kind of thing. And so there's lots of people being like, hey, this is great. Like, they're blowing up all the botters and ruining they're making EVE a better game, essentially. So
maybe the entire point of this invasion expansion was just like a 2-year long play to just fuck up botters.
Right, that would be amazing. They invented this whole story, this alien war. Yeah, I love it. It feels, on the one hand, I'm sure CCP has been planning this for years, if not months. On the other hand, I love this idea that it just was something that they've slapped together like in a week. Because the way it's sort of just changing gears, they were blowing up structures and then they disappeared and now they're back and they're blowing up players, and then it feels kind of haphazard in a way where like I just love the idea that someone at CCP Games in Iceland is just like drunk as hell at his computer and just being like, and now it's gonna blow up all the Care Bears. And like, who knows?
It does sort of have that like Fortnite games as a service feel to it, where it's just like every week they're just gonna just change some. Fuck it, let's put this in the game, change this thing, and now this is gonna happen. Yeah.
That's actually a really interesting observation, because I think that would be a really smart way for MMO type games to make things interesting week to week, because if they took from that Fortnite model, obviously the Fortnite model, I mean, there's been the articles about the crunch that goes on producing that sort of live service week to week event system that Fortnite has. If there was a way to do it sustainably, I think that would be a really interesting thing. Like the idea that each week in EVE Online, something new and crazy is happening would be really exciting. So it definitely has, whether you hate it or you love it, I certainly think that the nullsec players that are complaining, I get it, but maybe you just need to stop complaining so much, or, like get over it. And to a certain extent, I think regardless, it's cool to see EVE Online still able to do something that just sort of surprises and shakes up everything. And I think CCP Games does deserve some credit, even if maybe they didn't do it in the most, even if the Drifter invasion ended up being more of a nuisance. It's cool that they were willing to take the risk to begin with. I think a lot of developers would not want to mess with that.
And even if the nullsec players didn't actually enjoy that event itself, they're probably going to enjoy trying to cause massive amounts of grief for CCP the next month. So
exactly,
they'll get some fun out of it.
I think it's a win-win kind of situation. It's cool. I haven't written about EVE in a little while here, and personally I haven't played it in a little while too, and it was just a game that I wasn't as interested in at this current time in my life, and so this certainly got me back into being excited about EVE Online again, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So
cool.
Yeah.
Well, stick to PCGamer.com, because I'm sure we'll have Steven spend all day writing another really great feature sometime soon when it develops. Is there like a timeline, or is it just unfolding now?
That's the thing. Even still, no one has any idea what CCP has planned. So yeah, I hope they have like a month worth of like things to build up. It would be cool if it really built up to something dramatic. If they did just wipe the slate clean and just, I don't know, they would never do that, but it would be amazing if there was something very cataclysmic that happened.
Right on. Let's move on to our next topic, and it's the best and worst of the year so far. We're going to talk about our opinions. Do you guys have them?
Never.
What are opinions?
Well, we're going to talk about those opinions, whether you like it or not. Let's reflect on the year so far, and from our personal perspective, our kind of highs and lows in terms of what we played. It's been a busy year. It's a whirlwind. We're already halfway through it, and it's a good time to reflect on stuff that I think is sticking with us and stuff that disappointed us.
I think we should start with the game on both of your lists.
Yeah. Which one's that? Am I missing it? Oh, biggest disappointment. Yeah, let's talk about our biggest disappointments first, because like this, we just got to get it out of the way. Anthem, like Steven, you've written too much on it, and I think I've talked about it too much. But yeah, it's what a terrible game.
What a terrible, you really feel, James.
It's a terrible fucking game. I have some friends who like stick by it, and I just like I can't.
Really?
Yeah, I won't name names, but like we're actively upset that it's being treated poorly or something. And I'm like, just have you played it? Have you played Anthem? I think we were all sort of during that last like month or two of previews beginning to get skeptical, but everyone was sold on the flying and animation, but man, it a tragic.
I was the opposite. I think if
really?
you go back and look at like the work chat, Anthem's launch. Oh, okay, yeah. Like I was growing a little bit skeptical, but like I was genuinely. I still am haunted by the moment when in work Slack I said, "Guys, I think I like Anthem's lore," and not knowing, not knowing what a fucking nosedive it was gonna take halfway through the game. But I was like, "Oh, this world is so cool and exciting to explore."
Yeah, there's good stuff in the codices and whatnot, but yeah, it's obvious, like after reading the Kotaku story about that game's trouble development, that it's not strictly a problem with like people who are bad at game design. It kind of comes down to just mismanaged time and
it's frustrating because that Kotaku story really felt like it was all like when you talk about game development, it's easy to sort of equate the whole management aspect with sort of the principles of actual game design. Like there's the game designers, there's like sort of the boots on the ground grunt workers that are making this game, and then there's tiers and tiers and tiers of management who are sort of structuring and organizing them, and all of those jobs are important. But I think Anthem's problems almost were entirely with sort of upper management and nothing to do with sort of the average BioWare employee. And it was really sad. Like I even get to the point where I'm like, I don't ever want to write another negative thing about Anthem because like I just feel bad for those people who probably put 6 years of their lives and blood, sweat, and tears into this game, and then because of decisions beyond their control, it just fell so flat.
Yep.
But yeah.
Bummer. Hopefully, they defy the odds and turn that into something interesting. But
do you think it can do that, James?
Absolutely not. No. No.
I think it's hopeless
fundamentally too. That game is. There's so many fundamentals that are just like irreparable unless you gut the whole thing and just basically start over.
I think my problem with Anthem is like, because that game so obviously didn't have like a core idea of what it wanted to do. It just wanted it, like the thing was like they wanted to have mech suit flying.
Yeah.
And then they wanted to, make a loot shooter because that's a popular genre. I don't think that's like enough of a hook. Whereas games like the Warframe, that kind of sort of came back from the brink, or the Division. I'm trying to think, even Destiny. Yeah. I think those games had like these core ideas and they just missed the mark. And then they spent a bunch of time sort of putting in the work to get to that core vision of what they always wanted. And I don't think Anthem really has that core vision to begin with. So I almost just think like the best thing to do is just move on, like stop crunching your employees and make better games.
Yeah. Get that scope in scope your projects better, I think, as well. But I don't make games. I don't manage game development studios.
Right.
Let's talk about our other disappointments of the year, and some of these might be contentious. For me, Metro Exodus is simultaneously like one of my favorite games and one of my least favorite games of the year. I have no problem with that, like weighty, the awkward shooting, the stiff kind of character movement, and no problem with that. The worlds are beautifully crafted and so atmospheric and evocative of that setting, and different. Like it's really cool. I just finished the Caspian Sea level, but I can't finish the game because it just crashes when I load into the next big area. That's not even part of my criticism. It's just that I think the tone and writing is just the worst shit in the world, and it totally takes away from an otherwise.
Is there like something specific? That's so funny because I played through it and I beat it, and obviously it's not the greatest game ever.
I think it's just
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought the writing was fine.
It's personal preference. Like this is like fair. I can still wholeheartedly recommend this game to people. I just think for me, if your pet peeve is like that kind of ham-fisted dialogue, then it clashes with the really restrained mood of playing that game. The rest of that game, exploring those really quiet, desolate mysterious open worlds.
Right. But then you're stuck
It
on a
seems,
train
it seems
for
like
15
that game
minutes.
likes to just like knock you out and then wake you up somewhere else to like
Yeah.
transition between
Yeah. Chris was going
levels.
crazy.
That's a good point.
From that. Yeah, it's not the. I don't think it tells its story elegantly at all. Or I don't even actually know exactly what's happening. I just don't care. I just want to walk through the pretty yard.
Well, as someone that's read all the books, I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I have, but I'm not.
I mean that might make it easier because you have like an anchor point.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, sure.
We got to clip through these though. So Steven, what's your other disappointment?
The other one I wrote down was Void Bastards. To be honest, I was struggling for a disappointment. Yeah. There hasn't been a whole lot this year that I've hated, other than just not enjoying Anthem. But Void Bastards, I felt disappointed in just because it's clearly like such a great idea for a game that just doesn't have enough. Especially like when it comes to enemy types. So if you're not familiar with Void Bastards, it's sort of like a BioShock meets a roguelike. So you play sort of a randomly generated character and you're going on these missions where you go over to spaceships and then you go on them and explore the spaceships, and the spaceships are all sort of procedurally generated, and you're gathering supplies and then moving on to the next spaceship, and then along the way you're crafting upgrades and whatever, and it's got like a really cheeky tone to it that's fine. If you're someone that giggles a lot at British witticisms, you'll probably like it. But for me, like, I really enjoyed the first 5 hours of it, and then I hit this point where I was like, okay, I'm seeing like the exact same enemies on every single ship. It didn't feel like there was enough sort of interactivity with the enemies. Like I would have, like Wes, you were talking earlier about a medieval just sort of having one-dimensional enemies, and I think this also has one-dimensional enemies where there's just, once you kind of figure out the thing to do with them, that you're just repeating that thing to do again and again and again. And because it doesn't have something like incredible level design like a medieval has, you're just going through the same kind of corridors, even though they're randomly generated, looking for supplies. It really fell off quick for me, where I went from being like, this game's super cool, to being like,
and also it's not meant to feel and evoke like a game from 1998,
Right.
Which is like the thing, a medieval, it's like that context makes a flat character a little more acceptable. A flat enemy.
You almost get permission to have sort of outdated game design because that's part of the nostalgia. But for this, like, it looks gorgeous. I've heard people saying like, oh, it's so much more enjoyable if you go back and play it on a much harder difficulty, where it really is very punishing and you really have to consider every single step you make. I was just playing it on normal, but I felt like it didn't have enough. I would love to see, I think it's a game that's so ripe for like a sequel where they take everything that was good about it and just expand and double down on it, and then that's when they'll finally have like a really winning formula. So not a bad game by any means. It's just, I was a bit disappointed by it.
Wes, I'm not seeing any worsts. You enjoy all of your.
He literally just wrote down something that Steven likes, which is so rude.
Just wanted to give you a hard time.
I get no respect.
Honestly, you guys tend to play a lot more stuff for the job than I do. So most of my gaming time is just me playing whatever stupid shit I'm obsessing over, like just playing weeks of Slay the Spire or some RPG or something. So I haven't really played anything this year that I disliked, I don't think.
Right.
I was trying to come up with something. I guess I was slightly disappointed in Wargroove, and it wasn't that there was anything wrong with the game at all, but I kind of, for a long time, I was like, oh yeah, like spiritual successor to Advanced Wars. Like, I'm so ready for that. I love Advanced Wars so much. Like, looks great. And it came out and I played for like an hour or something, and then I was kind of just like, okay. And I just didn't play any more of it. Not necessarily anything wrong with that game. Just didn't hook me, and I guess I was not as nostalgic for Advanced Wars as I thought I was.
I can agree with you there. Yeah. Good fun, but I don't got that thirst anymore. We have a lot of favorites here, so why don't we just like list our bests, but pick one to sort of expand on that you want to highlight. And I think we'll save Sekiro just for last, because I think we can all agree that game owns. But for me, I've got, I don't know. I've got some obvious ones here: Fortnite, Apex Legends. a medieval we talked about at length, but Pathologic 2 is still I have yet to beat it, and I don't know if I ever will. Honestly, it's just very, very punishing, and that's sort of the point. And I have a hard time talking about this game and like recommending it to people because it is meant to be a misery bath. It is you play an unreliable narrator who is also a terrible human, and you are tasked with saving this vaguely like I don't know, Eastern European village from a terrible plague. You have 12 days to do it. Also, everyone in the village hates you. You starve in like a day, and you have very little money. So you need to like basically sell marbles to kids and whatnot to afford bread money. It's a dreadful, miserable experience, but it has a different goal than most games, and its goal is to make you feel that kind of to shake you up and make you sit in that misery bath and really consider why, like, your role in this systemic world. And it sort of challenges a lot of game design tropes we sort of take for granted, like the player's position in the world and their sort of universal, how most players are the center of the universe, in whatever video game they're in. And in this one, no one gives a shit about you. Like, no one, it happens with or without you. And often you can't save everyone. Well, you literally can't. You just can't save everyone, and you can't always stop the plague, and it is meant to grind you down, and
Damn, James,
make you
that's
sit
deep.
with that that feeling. And I can't recommend that to everyone, but for me that's really valuable. It's not the kind of thing I'm going to play if I'm wanting to have fun, but it is an interactive experience like no other. Also, just incredible atmosphere, some lovely art. The writing is so like poetic at times, and without coming off as like art school poetic, like smart righty. But I highly recommend people, like, in a sale, just pick it up if you can, and just kind of poke around. Even if you don't plan on finishing it, they added difficulty options that are still like pretty tough even on the easiest setting, but at least get in there and soak in a bit of that and kind of take that with you, that experience and that context with you to other games. Anyway, I'll shut up about that. But what about you guys? What are your bests so far?
I wrote down a few things. Slay the Spire, which we've probably talked about at length on the podcast at this point. Just many people on the PC Gamers teams, if not favorite game of the year, then up there. It's the time killer of the year for sure. Just such a good roguelike deck builder. Demon's Tilt is a super badass like heavy metal pinball game.
Shit, I forgot about that.
In the vein of Devil's Crush, which was an old, I think, TurboGrafx game. It's just a really cool pinball. Kind of has some like shmup elements in there where enemies appear on the board, and like they're like, demon babies like spitting fire at you, and you have to hit them with the ball to kill them. And it's just like really fun 2D sprite art and lots of pixels and shaders flying around. It's real good shit. Resident Evil 2,
Oh
fantastic
yeah.
recreation of that game. Just like, what a great tightly designed space that they made that police station. They didn't try to make it too big. They kept it like pretty small scale, expanded it a bit, but just what a pleasure that place was to explore. And they kept all the like, stupid old Resident Evil rules intact. Like,
I love it.
gotta get the knife to cut open the fuse box.
That's like the
it.
least
I
stupid
eat
of
that shit
them.
up.
I had to
know.
get like an arm
That's like the
statue and
first
take the
level.
jewel out of it.
Put that
and
shit in my
it into
veins.
it.
Like, I love that kind of puzzle solving and logic.
It's so bad, it's good.
Yeah. And Risk of Rain 2, which is a game that's going to be in early access for another like 6 months or so. I think they said like early next year is when it's going to come out. It's already super fun. If you like the first Risk of Rain, or if you just kind of like this style of this core loop, right, of like collecting loot, enemies get harder and harder as you go, kind of the randomness of getting all these items that give you like a really crazy powerful build every, so many runs when you combine the right stuff, get the right synergies. uh it's fun now, but you're not missing out on anything by waiting for the full game. I think like they're going to add more bosses to fight so that it's a little less repetitive, and it already has like 5 playable characters, 6 playable characters.
Yeah.
Something like that. But they're adding more, so they're going to have a full roster and like have kind of a ending level when it releases. Right now you kind of just go through the same environments over and over again, so you don't have like a capper to doing a run, but they're going to add that in. But already super fun, and it's amazing how well they translated 2D Risk of Rain into 3D and kept the same feel basically.
All excellent picks. I gotta go back and play Demon still. Totally forgot about that.
Yeah, you'll love that shit, James.
Right on. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, so I put down Outer Wilds, which I've talked about on the podcast before. The Division 2, I'm sure we talked to death as well. I think that's just a really good game. It's almost a bit sad because I feel like the Division 2 is the best loot shooter. I think it's better than Destiny 2, and I think that game dropped off hard for everybody. Like, it just didn't seem to have much staying power. I don't know why.
Yeah, at least in the video game Twitter consciousness or blogosphere. Yeah. Like, I hope that they're doing well and keeping up player numbers, because it was.
They're certainly doing interesting
things.
Got
a lot of players.
Yeah. It's going to New York next year. Like, they're going back to Manhattan.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know, how extensive that'll be, but it looks really cool. The one I wanted to talk about was just Total War 3 Kingdoms. I think, like, as someone that's not, there's certainly people on our team that are much bigger sort of grand strategy aficionados, but I've always dabbled in the genre. Like, Total War 3 Kingdoms is just so outrageously good, and the reverence it has for that era of Chinese history, but in recreating it almost to a T, I think is really cool. And I think it's really telling that game has been so well embraced by the Chinese sort of PC gaming audience. Like, the reviews are so positive for it. I've talked to, Chinese players, and they talk about how they've nailed it all. Like, even the pronunciations from the voice actors they got right. Like, I think Creative Assembly just really pulled out all the stops to create such a lovingly crafted sort of tribute to this romanticized period of Chinese history, and the Romance of the Three Kingdoms books. At the same time, like, it's just the best Total War game. Like, the diplomacy is finally good because it's a character drama instead of a faction drama. You're not just playing sort of, a nameless faction. You're playing a specific warlord. I think it gives it so much more flavor in sort of the diplomacy aspect of it, because you really start to develop these rivalries that there's a face associated with it. You get to a point where you just hate Cao Cao, or you hate, Yuan Shao, and you just want that fucker to die. And that's something I've never really, that's something I've only really experienced in like Crusader Kings 2, never in another Total War game. And so, yeah, I think that's just a brilliant game that everyone should play, even if you're not a big strategy fan. I mean, who doesn't love giant armies? As someone that's recently watched Lord of the Rings just to see the fight scenes, that game is
dork.
I just love big battles. Man.
I'm totally with you.
What could you do?
I'm totally with you. Right on.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think, I don't know, I saved Sekiro for last because I think it's the highest reviewed game of the year for us, unless I'm missing something.
We gave Slay the Spire a very high score.
Oh, it might be tied with that.
It's certainly up there.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've talked at length about Sekiro. We could talk about it forever, but I think in most of across the team, the people who've played it, it's definitely the best of the year for many of us so far. But we'll see.
They got the same score.
Same score. Shit.
It's tied.
Shit. That's going to be an interesting game of the year discussion. And like, what else is happening? I don't even know. But yeah.
And people can guess which one is going to place higher on the PC Gamer Top 100 out in the next issue of the magazine.
That's coming out. It's going to be a good list, I think. A lot of big changes, some shocking developments.
It's controversial.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Fortnite number 1. Spoiler.
I was
Minecraft
literally
number
about to say Fortnite at number 1. That couldn't be a real.
I'm our only Fortnite envoy, so I don't know if I could talk that up to you guys. Let's move on real quick. Running out of time, so I don't know if we'll have time for questions, but let's talk about Teamfight Tactics and just auto chess
Yeah.
in general. Like I don't know anything about auto chess. Well, I do, but let's pretend. What the hell is this genre, this mysterious genre that sprouted up out of nowhere? Can someone tell me, please? I need to know. Who's going to tell me?
God. It's a it's a card game
What?
that you play chess with.
Oh.
And then none of the combat, all of the combat happens automatically.
It is kind of like if you were playing a deck builder, except you didn't get to choose how you played the cards. It's like you build a deck and then you just flip the cards over and just hope that they work.
And it's sort of modeled on
attack the right enemy, basically.
It's modeled on MOBAs, or at least like kind of pulls from the
so the original mod, they basically took heroes out of Dota and just threw them on a chess looking board, checkerboard, and made them automatically fight each other, and then the whole game is how you build up your team.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's all about making those synergies.
So different characters and cards have different synergies, and where you place them in relation to another person's team will stack the odds or not in your favor, as I understand it.
So it started as a Dota mod. There's now a official Valve version called Dota Underlords, and there's an official League of Legends ripoff called Teamfight Tactics, and then there's a non-Dota themed standalone game about to come out. It's already on mobile. It's about to come out on PC from the creators of the mod, just called Auto Chess.
Yeah.
Who boy?
The Chinese developers who made the mod. So yeah, it's kind of a messy situation.
So
and I just saw today that Tencent is doing their own mobile version, their own mobile knockoff of Auto Chess.
Wait, what? So separate from Auto Chess.
Separate from Auto Chess, separate from the League of Legends one, which they own.
Fuck me.
And separate from the one that's on the Epic, going to be on the Epic Store, which they have some stake in. So it's a very
interesting.
There's a lot of Auto Chess going on.
It's the new battle royale.
Yeah.
Okay. Why are people playing this? Is it just it's just like people who like, if you like optimizing stats and analyzing stats and sort of stacking them in your favor against massaging the chaos to...
Yeah. So I messaged Steven about this on Monday, and I was like, we need to talk about Teamfight Tactics. I think I hate it. And he's like, oh, I love it. So I want to hear...
Yeah, make a case.
I want to hear what you get out of it, Steven, and then I want to try to describe. I don't hate it, but I'm very conflicted.
Yeah, so I'm playing Teamfight Tactics. I think what I love about it is it kind of has... It reminds me of a game like Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering, where even though you have this deck, there's still like a lot of random luck inherent in getting the right draw, right? Like if you just draw bad cards, you're going to die. And I think it has that same thing, but minus the monetary aspect of it. Like what I hate about Hearthstone is constantly having to reach for my wallet to feel like I'm competitive. Whereas something like this, it's a perfect playing field that anyone can play. There's no having to buy cards or grind for anything like that. You're just going in and getting the best synergies. I think what I love about it is it's just sort of satisfying to build a strategy and then over 30 seconds and make these sort of decisions of like, oh, do I, buy this character and add them to my team? Do I spend my gold on it, leveling up my character? I don't know, you'd call it like if you level up your guy, then you can have more members. So you're like, okay, do I want to prioritize like fewer but stronger heroes or having a bigger team? Do I want to like be combining heroes and making those kind of like snap decisions constantly in addition to positioning and the overall team composition you're going for? I think it's a lot of decision making that you're making. That's a weird sentence. It's a lot of decision making that I find really satisfying. It's fun to set up your little sandcastle, your little team, and then have it fight off against another team, and then seeing how it compares. And I think it does create some kind of drama when you're just sitting back and watching and being like, oh god, and like they're whittling each other down, and it's super close, and if you win, you can hang on and you might be able to take it. I will say that like I've won once, and that win made me had the adrenaline rush that I felt the first time I won a battle royale, where I was just like, I did it, like, oh my god, it felt like such a triumph. And so that was like a really addicting thing. And so yeah, I really think it's more like a card game than anything. And it has all of the things that I find addicting about card games, or really exciting about card games, without a lot of the bullshit that comes along with them as well.
I think that's a really interesting comparison, especially for League of Legends, where it's not like a pay to win game where you can buff normally as a MOBA, right? You can't just be like, I'm going to buy this thing that makes my hero more powerful or something. It doesn't have that kind of thing, but it totally does require you to spend either a lot of money or a lot of time if you want to acquire more heroes to play as, because unlike Dota, you only get the weekly rotation of free heroes, and maybe they've changed some stuff. Maybe you can get a good chunk of them relatively affordably, but
it is pretty generous these days. But yeah, like you are grinding. Yeah, and this, like, you just have everything you need. And yeah, I find that fun, and I think like the synergies are so different. Like it is a bit weird because it's not like in League of Legends, the different champions you're playing as are, and Wes, you'll note this, like they're wildly different. It's not like, oh, this one has slightly more of an armor stat and this one has slightly less of an armor stat. They have 4 different abilities, they have completely different play styles, and that can be like, it feels like a different experience depending on different champions. There's over 100 of them, so obviously some of them sort of coalesce together. But what I love about these synergies is it kind of echoes a bit of that as well. Like, it's fun putting together like a sorcerer composition and seeing how that plays out. And I've had a lot of fun with experimenting in a way that I usually don't like doing in competitive games, because I don't like losing. But losing in this doesn't feel that painful, because it's it's a 8-player free for all. Coming in 4th doesn't feel that bad, or coming in 3rd, I'm like, I still did good. And so I definitely am going into games much more willing to experiment, and I'm like, I'm gonna try this crazy build, and then it's really satisfying when you just pulled a build out of your ass and it ends up working, and suddenly you're like stomping everybody, and you're like, I don't even mean to do this, but I picked the right champions. So
I think there is a detachment there for sure from losing, because you're not directly controlling stuff. And so you feel less, it feels like less that it's on you when your little guys get killed. It's kind of just like, well, that didn't work. For me, I felt also that same detachment when it came to winning. Which the first, I don't know, I've probably played a dozen games, maybe 15 games, something like that. And I like was really bad at it at first, or just wasn't doing well, or like build a team and I do all right for a while, and then get to kind of towards the end game and then go up against people who clearly knew what they were doing, or just had way better luck on the draw, and then like just get wrecked later on. And then I had one game over the weekend where I was like, okay, I have a pretty good team composition here, I'm like getting pretty good draws, things are working well for me, and I ended up getting 2nd place, and it was down to me and one other person fighting each other 3 times in a row at the end. And in the final fight, we each had 1 character left with like a sliver of HP, and whoever won that round was going to win the match. And like his character had more health than mine, or was stronger than mine, and they won. And that wasn't a surprise at all, because it didn't look like it was going to go my way. So I wasn't especially disappointed by that loss, but I think it kind of made me realize what I don't like about the game, which is, and granted, maybe this is still because I'm new to it, and there's a level of understanding I could reach by reading a bunch of guides or watching, high level play on Twitch or whatever, but it feels so arbitrary to me how a fight plays out, to the point that like I can't really get invested in trying to win, because there's so much randomness in how they play out. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's not as random as it felt, But in those 3 matches where we went back and forth, we basically had the same units the whole time. My opponent might have made a couple upgrades here or there. Like I think I did a little bit, but not much. And like in one match, just based on the placement of our units and which units our AI characters decided to target, like the first match, like I beat him pretty handily. The second match, he just utterly destroyed me. And then the third one came down to being really, really close. And all we were doing was like moving our units around on the board a bit.
Yeah.
And that affected how like the assassin characters who jump to the back lines, it affected like who they target, and it affected, you know, who the frontliners used their special abilities on and stuff. And I know that you can look at the other person's board in Teamfight Tactics and like see where they have their units at that moment, but it didn't feel like something that I could easily take a bit of information and then put it into effect and go, okay, I need to put my units here that will counter this. It just felt like, why am I even bothering placing my units in this particular configuration when it's so unpredictable
Right.
what the result of that is going to be? And if that's what it comes down to win, then like I don't care.
Yeah, it's just dumb luck at that point, right?
That's how it felt. Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. It's funny because I think in that way it does sort of mimic like the MOBAs that these games are derived from, because there's sort of this infinite decision making space, and obviously like pro MOBA players are on a different level where they are making informed decisions, but at least when I'm playing League of Legends, I'm not necessarily making I'm not skilled enough to take in all of the data to make informed decisions, so I'm oftentimes just sort of going off the small amount of data I can sort of parse and then going from there. But I might try and gank someone not knowing that the other jungler is like ready to just jump on top of me and he's just waiting, and I've been outplayed. And I think that this game has a hint of that, like, or at least tricks people into thinking that that's the case, but it might not actually be the case. It might actually just be that auto chess games are just really all dumb luck from top to bottom, and people, you know what I mean? Like
that's what it felt like, and that's where I'm kind of at, is like, do I want to look into this enough and like do the research or whatever to see, okay, how much strategy can I actually put into the placement? If I can get the randomness down to the point where if my team composition is really good and I know how to counter the enemy person's placement, that I'm going to win the vast majority of the time based on using that knowledge correctly, then I can accept a little bit of randomness.
right.
But at least coming at it as a pretty new player, it didn't feel like that. It felt like, okay, let's just move these characters around the board. Oh, a totally different thing happened because they had also moved some pieces around the board.
Yeah.
And like, why are we even bothering with all
It would
this?
be fascinating to talk to like the Teamfight champion, best player in the world. I can't even remember her name. They like recently.
Hafu?
Yeah, is that it?
She's a Hearthstone player, I think.
Yeah, and Riot recently just came out and was like, "You're actually like the top ranked League of or Teamfight Tactics player." Anyway, it would be interesting to talk to her and see how she's approaching a game, because I also think that because this is a new genre, I people just don't know how to play it. Like I know how to play it on a mechanical level. I don't know how to strategize in an effective way, and I wonder if that's something where the pros like Hafu, it has sort of this untapped knowledge that they could share with me, or if really it's just down to, I don't know. I don't know enough about it. Like I don't know if you can, yeah, there is so much possibility in any kind of matchup where you're gonna fight someone, and I don't know. It is tricky. I just find it addicting. I think it's cute. I like League of Legends already. I think what it needs is like a really good overarching progression system. Like, and I know that they're working on adding one in. Actually, I think it's out today. But something that like as you're playing, if you're grinding for like unlocks and cosmetics, I think would sort of help keep me interested in the long term. But yeah, for right now, I don't know, because I find it less painful than Hearthstone. I'm finding it an easy game to slip into, even if I don't win.
It definitely has that RNG pull. Like I absolutely
Yeah.
felt that of like that thrill of the moment where you press like the reroll button to refresh the store and like maybe get that
Yes.
character that, you know, completes your build. Like that is what makes you re-queue as soon as you die
Yeah.
out of a round. I definitely felt that, but then after playing a bit more, I sort of felt the counterbalance to it was like, actually, I feel kind of empty at the end of a match, even where I do well, because I feel like my choices are so driven by this randomness that in the end it's not actually satisfying to play. I'm just like
Sure.
I'm just spinning the wheel and just seeing what comes out, you know.
One of the things, like, I've played Underlords and I just don't like it, and it's because it just takes too damn long. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to sit down and play a 60-minute game of this. And even Teamfight Tactics, like, sometimes I look at the time and I'm like, you know, if I finish second place or the game I won, it was like 40 minutes. And you know, that's too long, even though I didn't realize I was having fun. So I didn't realize how fast the time was passing. But I would love it if someone could find a way to do like the Heroes of the Storm thing, and really double down on shortening the length of that game, because I think that would then help it that would loan itself more towards those strengths of the RNG sort of gotcha, easy come, easy go losses and wanting to requeue, versus, you know, when you're still playing for 25 minutes, that's kind of a big ask. And when you're playing a game that is just so heavily determined by randomness, you know?
Yeah, you play it as like it's like an 8-player round robin where you keep fighting until there's one person standing.
Yeah.
And I
So
don't
you
know
can
if
get
it would,
knocked out really quick and
yeah, but I don't know if it would
requeue.
lose anything by being 4 players instead.
I don't think so. I guess technically it lowers the ceiling on the strategy, because you're not having to pay attention to 8 separate players. But I don't even know if the pros are, like, it's not. I don't think a pro player gets into the game and then is constantly monitoring every action that the 7 other players are doing. I think very quickly you start to see a sort of like a pecking order develop as games start to play, of like who's a strong player, who's a total weak player that you're just going to stomp. But yeah, it's an interesting genre. I don't know how I
We'll
feel
see
about
how
it yet
it
either.
develops. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fun. It kind of tickles this lizard part of my brain.
Well, I still don't want to play it.
Just play Final
It's
Fantasy
okay.
14 instead.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm happy there are more stat nerd games for stat nerds. It's okay. It's okay. I'll just go back to my depressing misery baths and cry.
I love that. I love a misery bath.
I like a misery bath. It's
Yeah.
like, I don't know. We are over time. Thanks for the breakdown and the interesting, like, I feel like I understand them more, discussion about auto chess games. We'll certainly be seeing more of them over the next year. I kind of wonder what kind of tail this genre has, especially with Hearthstone and MOBAs and Battle Royale and all these other genres that are sort of ongoing pillar games. We'll see how it goes. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can always catch us here, twitch.tv/PCGamer at 1 p.m. Pacific time. You can catch us after the fact at youtube.com/PCGamer or pcgamer.com/tag/podcast if you want the audio podcast. We're on iTunes again. Search The PC Gamer Show, not The PC Gamer Podcast, if you want to listen to us on there. You can find us on Spotify, Anchor.fm, Google Play, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just get that MP3. Get that MP3. Put it on your Walkman or whatever. Burn it to a CD. And
Put it on a cassette.
Put it on a cassette. Get the 8-track out. Yeah, we are available to listen to wherever you can find podcasts pretty much at this point. And, you know, if you're on iTunes, leave a rating, leave a review if you got the time and if you like us. It would really help us get visible again. I'm hoping we can merge those podcasts in the store somehow, but I don't know. It's another mountain to climb at some point. But yeah, until next week, we will see you later. And don't forget to game on.
Game on.
See you guys.
Steven said game on.
Say it.
On.
There it is. There it is. Bye bye.